Hi everyone, welcome to CPPR Dialogue. This is Lisbeth Godwin, Senior Research Associate at CPPR, and I am joined by Mr. Ranjit Gadgil to discuss on bus rapid transit system and metro, a closer look at Pune's public transport system. Mr. Ranjit is a program director at Parisar, a Pune-based NGO working in promoting sustainable transportation solutions through research, advocacy, and outreach. He has been associated with several NGOs gaining experience in various sectors and has also served as program director of Janwani, an initiative of the Matra Chamber of Commerce, Industries, and Agriculture, where he launched several urban governance projects. Welcome, Mr. Ranjit. So happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So to move on with our topic today, what we're basically going to discuss would be about the BRTS system and the metro system. And we also want to look at cities where these two are functioning and how it has shaped up the urban transport ecosystem. Many cities are now having metro systems, and so there has been recent debates also about the viability of metro systems, especially in those cities where BRTS was first implemented. Now, recently also, there is a study by, IIT Delhi by Dr. Geetam Tiwari and DT Jain as well, which was talking about the low ridership in metro systems. So this has sort of sparked a lot of debates. A lot of people have been talking for it, against it, but then there are experts who also suggest that the debate should not actually be over, BRTS or bus versus metro rail, but rather of should cities get the benefit of having every single mode of transport? How do you actually select on what is suitable for a particular city, or what do the citizens or commuters actually need? So, Mr. Ranjit, I would like to start off by asking you, what is your take on this? How do cities actually, which already have an existing BRT system, should look towards investing in a metro infrastructure? What is the right approach to go about with it?
It's really important to take a step back to understand why bus rapid transit systems were suggested in the first place. In the city of Curitiba in Brazil, it was a city that was considering the choice between a metro system, and when they understood that the cost of implementing a metro system is rather high, they were wondering if is there any other alternative. And at that time, the idea of providing what was then called metro on wheels, which is the idea of trying to get all the advantages of metro, but getting it at a much lower cost, first came about. This means that, what are the advantages of metro? First of all, it has a dedicated right of way, which buses normally don't have. It also has a good amount of boarding facilities, level boarding, and a large number of people can get on and off the metro rail. So same systems were also designed for buses with the wide doors and the level boarding, so that a lot of people can get on and off the bus very quickly. And of course, then it also has the metro systems often have very good passenger information systems, so people know exactly when the next metro is going to come. And you have a good quality of services. The metro stations, the metro bogies, all of that is considered very high class. And normally one doesn't associate that with buses. So the idea was, can we bring all of these wonderful qualities in a bus system? And therefore, that eventually became known as the bus rapid transit system. The other big difference between metro rail and bus rapid transit is that what you refer to, what sort of a system should a city actually adopt? And that depends on what is the projected ridership, what is the capacity of the system that you actually need. Now, metro rail system is a very good system, but it also caters to an extremely high passenger number, which is often referred to in technical terms as the passengers per hour per direction. And once those numbers are very high, you ought to look at a metro rail system. But actually, as it turns out, that most Indian cities do not have very high needs for this kind of passenger transportation volumes. And therefore, the bus rapid transit, which has a lower capacity, is usually adequate for a city. There will be definitely exceptions if one considers a city like Mumbai, certain parts of Bangalore, certainly Delhi. Then the ridership, the projected ridership would be so high that you would need a metro rail system. So that is where the two systems sort of came into place. And like you also said, a city should have the advantage of several systems. One cannot just say that only a metro, or only a bus, or only a BRT will work. Usually, it's going to be a combination of the right kinds of systems that will allow people to move seamlessly from one place to another.
Right, sir. Absolutely. I think you have rightly pointed about the right of way. I think metro having a dedicated right of way, if that is possibly the one thing, so there you have an advantage over time, speed, and all of that. And that is again one of the prominent reasons why people may or may not opt for public transport, because a lot of them say they cannot rely due to the time factor. But since you were mentioning about the projected ridership, which will form part of the detailed project reports of, the metros before it comes into place, a lot of DPRs have actually shown a higher ridership, but we know what the reality is in Indian cities, that maybe they're not even able to achieve 50% of what has been projected. So where do you think it's actually going wrong? Why isn't what's projected? Why aren't we even even a bit closer to the actual ridership if you look at the metro systems?
Yes, you have touched upon a rather important point, which many of us who are studying these systems know quite well. In order for a city, correct, for the audience to know, in order for a city to actually get a metro rail system, a detailed project report has to be prepared. It has to be submitted to the ministry, and the ministry has to approve it. And one of the reasons to approve a metro system is, like you said, it has to be justified. You have to have that high level of ridership. The fact of the matter is, and this is a statement that I'm making at least based on our very detailed study of the Pune DPR, and I would suspect that most of the other DPRs would be the same, is that the projected ridership is inflated. It is blatantly inflated by the project consultants, because if they don't, then justifying the metro rail system would be very difficult. This is usually done by over projecting both the expected population. So urban growth has been overestimated in our country for a very long time. Actually, our urban growth numbers are not so high. And secondly, of course, the other way to fudge this, and I'm sorry that I'm using this word, but there's no other way around it, that the ridership itself, the number of people who will choose to use metro, is also fudged. And these numbers are overinflated, and therefore the metro project then becomes it passes the scrutiny and therefore gets approved. Now, usually what happens is that later on, like you rightly said, once the metro system is implemented, the truth becomes apparent, and you can actually look at the ridership numbers, and those were usually much lower. You mentioned the number 50%. That's a good estimate. It is usually half or much less than half in some cases of the projected ridership. By that time, two things have happened. One is that the metro is already there, so no, you can't then now remove the metro in the first place. The second argument that is often made, and all cities are making this argument, that, oh, the ridership is low right now, but once we create more corridors and more stations, the ridership will go up. So this is sort of a false carrot that is dangled in front of the city to say that the way to fix the problem of low ridership is not to acknowledge that there was a problem with the DPR in the first place, but to say that this means that we need to build more metro. And we are seeing this story unfold in cities like Jaipur, in Lucknow, in Nagpur, etc., where ridership has been abysmally low. And the answers given by the metro rail corporations has been that once we build more metro, then those numbers will go up. Of course, once you build more metro, the numbers will, of course, go up, but they will certainly not go up in the quantum that you expect it to go up. By that time, the original numbers of the DPR that was made to justify the metro are long forgotten. They're often not available in the public domain. And it's only researchers like us who will point out that the metro has really not lived up to the expectation that it was supposed to have. At the end of the day, the cost of the metro and the other impacts that the metro has on the city, as well as displacing more economic and viable systems like bus rapid transit, is the real problem behind these metro systems.
Thank you so much, sir, for delving deep into it and rightly pointing it out. Like you have mentioned, a couple of cities have not been doing well. And I think, for example, in Jaipur, something we heard was that the metro in itself is built also along the low dense corridor. So, which means somewhere we're also failing on doing a very good thorough study before implementing such a system. And a lot of reason for such low ridership is also, lack of first or last mile connectivity. Even if there's an existing BRT or let's say city bus system also, how exactly are we planning on integrating these different systems needs to be planned very well, rather than, just going forth with this investment. Because to be frank, it's good. It might be a status symbol for a city. Sadly, that's how some are looking at the metro system. But what do you feel, since you mentioned about Pune, and in Pune we know it's among the first cities to have a BRT system, and now that the metro rail has also come forward, and I think few stations have opened up, it's functioning also. But what has been the approach of the citizens, Pune citizens, towards having a metro system, since they already experienced BRT? And I think there were a lot of challenges when it comes to Pune BRT. So were they for a metro system, thinking that it would, make the situation much better, or how did the public, actually react to this?
How the public reacts to the metro system is a somewhat complicated subject, and I'll try to deconstruct that to the best of my ability. Of course, like you said, it's a status symbol. So a lot of cities simply feel that getting a metro means something for the city. And that has often been the reason why there's been a lot of political support for the metro system, that it is purely an aspirational impact. And a lot of citizens also fall prey to that. There's no question about it. Secondly, you mentioned that the BRT system in Pune has faced problems. So there are actually two cities, neighboring cities in Pune. We often think of Pune as the Pune metropolitan region, which consists of Pune and the neighboring Pimpri-Chinchwad Municipal Corporation. Between the two of them, they were supposed to have almost 130 kilometers of a BRT network, which was approved under JNNURM. Pune was the first city in India to have a BRT corridor. And yes, of course, because it was a new system, there weren't enough expertise, there wasn't enough experience with it. And Indian roads are particularly chaotic. So implementing a BRT system is by no means an easy thing to do. Yet, I think that despite these issues, Pune had managed to put together a fairly decent BRT corridor. And Pimpri-Chinchwad, in fact, had done much better and had developed very good BRT corridors. In fact, they continue to have BRT corridors in their city. But because BRT was not able to live up to the image of BRT itself, that we mentioned that it should have these dedicated corridors, it should have a good passenger information system, it should have high quality bus shelters or bus stations. All of this was there, but it wasn't quite as good as it needed to be. So we saw a lot of encroachment of the BRT corridor by other vehicles, and there was simply not enough political will to curb that problem. There was a huge budget crunch for the BRT, which meant that a lot of the infrastructure had been built over time, had declined and had fallen into disrepair. For instance, the automatic doors stopped working at some point and were never repaired. The passenger information system had been launched, but soon that also fell out of service. And so people were not able to get that metro-like experience in BRT that they were supposed to have. Now, of course, for the regular bus user, it was still good because it meant that even in spite of these issues, the bus was able to move faster in the BRT corridor, which meant that their trip time was definitely reduced. So they got that advantage. But because of that, BRT was not able to, and people like us were very unhappy when that happened, that BRT should have worked so well that people should have questioned, why do we need the metro at all? That didn't happen. But in spite of that, I would say that lots of questions had been raised about metro in Pune. And we won't have enough time to go into it today, but the metro project in Pune had been delayed by many years simply because Punekars had raised some very valid issues about the metro. These things had reached all the way to the top when ultimately a decision was made that nothing doing. We don't want to take citizens' issues into concern, and the metro will be constructed no matter what. And so the metro, in some sense, was sort of forced upon Punekars. I'm not saying that all Punekars opposed it. Many were neutral, some were very for it, but definitely there was a good number of people who had very valid reasons to question the metro, question the alignment, question whether the ridership would be there, and also whether we should look at other systems instead of looking at metro in the first place.
That's actually good that the commuters also are suggesting, or they're very aware of what's happening around them and are raising their voices. But I don't think that it's, a great practice that we don't take the citizens' needs into consideration, because ultimately they are the ones who are going to use these systems. They will determine if your system is going to be successful or not. So, I mean, in Pune's case, I think that's quite a sad fact. And when we were actually when we visited Pune last time, and we were during our field visits, we happened to take the metro system. I don't exactly remember which station, but there was also, it was around 8 p.m. at night. So next to the metro station, there was actually a bus stop. So this metro station was very lit, with so many lights and all of that. And right next to it was a bus stop where there were a lot of, people waiting for a bus, including women. No street light, no lighting, nothing. It just showed that, very bare example, or the difference, how we're treating two systems, right? And if you look at the metro system, at that point at the metro station, I couldn't spot anyone. There were not many commuters or anything, but so many people waiting right next over there at the bus stand. So that was sort of an eye-opening for me, like, as to where are we actually investing? Are we actually responding to the commuter needs and demands? I don't really know. So that has also been very visible in Pune, and like you have already mentioned. So since I mentioned that, what do you think about, the investment from Pune Municipal Corporation as well as PCMC, Pimpri Chinchwad? How has their investments been over the years towards the transport sector? You've been working in Pune for quite a couple of years now. Has there been any transition or shift in the way they look at sustainable transport modes, or are they still behind huge infrastructure projects?
Yeah, so when JNRM first came about and the National Urban Transport Policy of 2006, activists like us and people who had been pushing for certain changes in the city, like you said, we should be looking at more cycling, more pedestrianization, and good public transport systems, and not trying to follow car-centric or a motor vehicle-centric model. We had a lot of gains in that. Pune, for instance, is one of the cities that has developed a comprehensive bicycle plan. As I mentioned, during JNRM, we were supposed to have a 130-kilometer network of bus rapid transit. The bus system of Pune, which actually serves the Pune metropolitan region, which is called PMPML, has about 1,500 buses. It is far less than the 3,000 buses that one needs if one is to get about 50 buses per lakh population, which is a rule of thumb that is generally used. But nonetheless, we have a bus system. I mean, sadly, if you look at many other cities, including the cities that have now opted for metro systems, they have almost no bus system or a very poor bus system to begin with. So these are not cities that have made a commitment to public transport in any way, but at least we had that. And we also have a pedestrian policy, we have urban street design guidelines, etc. However, what we have noticed over the last several years is that by no means is this obsession about trying to create infrastructure for cars, which is wider roads, flyovers, tunnels, and those kinds of solutions. These have not fallen out of favor. And in fact, sadly, even with the metro, they're trying to build elevated highways on the metro corridor itself. I mean, this itself shows you the tremendous conflict between these two issues. On the one hand, you're trying to build a metro system which should attract especially car users, which buses, they say, will not attract them. But then on the other hand, you're also building an elevated highway along the metro. So who would use the metro once you do that? So these kinds of conflicting messages are still being pursued by cities like Pune. And I would imagine that the same is true for cities like Mumbai and Delhi, etc., where there hasn't been that complete commitment to public transport, walking and cycling, and an absolute understanding that if we try to increase the number of vehicles in the city, we're just simply going to fail to solve the congestion, air pollution, and other problems that we know are associated with it. So in a sense, we are doing a bit of both, which is really bad. And in terms of the investments, you're right. I mean, the PMPML or the city bus system is essentially financed by the two municipal corporations. Luckily, both the municipal corporations are quite well off financially. And so they have actually given some amount of money to improve bus services, which is why at least our bus services haven't declined, which is also a trend that one sees in other cities. But it certainly hasn't improved to the level, both in terms of the quantity and the quality, which would make it an attractive option for commuters who still prefer to use a private vehicle when it comes to it. So certainly we need to do a lot more work before people will choose on their own to use public transport. Of course, the other thing that cities need to do is also to discourage the use of vehicles by having high parking prices and other transport demand management methods, which of course are not popular politically, and therefore many cities have not done that. Those things were supposed to happen with metro. In fact, one of the preconditions for metro in all cities, this is not just in Pune, but if you read the letter that was sent by the ministry when metro systems were approved in cities, it said that you have to have a parking policy, you have to have an integrated system, you have to have last mile connectivity. All of these things were mentioned, but unfortunately, they have been forgotten during the implementation.
And I think that's exactly why the low ridership actually happens. And given that, like in Pune now, that metros are also there, how do you think, are the authorities actually envisioning some sort of integration? Is some sort of integration already in place, or is it that the metro is running parallel to the bus system? And also, do you think that there's any shift of commuters who have been using bus system into the metro system? And what do you think about the corridor? Is it well connected?
Uh, so one of the major corridors that should have been built first, which is this uh, corridor that links to the IT park, which is just a little bit outside of Pune, should have been the first corridor to be built. For some reason, that was not. However, it is now being built, and one would expect that there will be decent ridership on that particular corridor. There will be a decent network in Pune. It will not be great. It will not be very less also. And therefore, in the end, we should see some decent ridership on the Pune metro system. It will run along the major corridors, so there will be an overlap with buses. I think that one should not try to think that there will not be an overlap with buses. The bus network is quite extensive, and a lot of people will choose a combination of the bus and the metro system. If you look at any city around the world, you will not have a situation where the buses don't run along the metro corridor. The metro corridor will be used by people who want to undertake longer distances. The bus will be used by people who maybe want to uh, travel to some other destination which is not served by metro, but there will be a considerable overlap between the bus system and the metro system. The real issue has been bus rapid transit, because a lot of these corridors were also BRT corridors, which meant it had a dedicated bus right of way. The issue with BRT has always been that it so-called takes a lane away from the car users, and which is why there's so much opposition to it. Unlike metro, which sort of goes out of its way to say that, see, we're not going to take any space away from the car users, and there'll be pillars, and then the metro will be
Right.
built on that.
Right.
And so what you're going to see is, you are always going to see some people who are using buses using metro. But unfortunately, that's not what we wanted in the first place. If people were using buses, then that was fine by the city. You just needed to improve the quality of the bus service. What you really need when you build a metro system is for the car users and the two-wheeler users to start using the metro, which is why you can then expect lower congestion and less amount of air pollution, and probably safer roads, etc. But if the metro system fails to attract car users and bike users or motorcycle users, then in some sense, one would say that the metro has failed, even if it has decent ridership. If all of that ridership is coming from buses, then really that's not the kind of modal shift that we wanted in the first place. Luckily, we have a managing director of the Pune Mahametro right now, who has a quite decent understanding of these issues. In fact, he has in public domain said many times that the mainstay of the public transport network in any city has to be the bus services, not the metro. And he cites examples of London and other big cities where the number of commuters on the existing bus system is usually as much, if not higher, than the metro system itself. So he understands that quite well. And now, of course, now that the metro is being built, there's been a lot of post facto efforts to try and create last mile connectivity systems, both in terms of buses, in terms of shared mobility. So shared auto rickshaws is a good way to create that last mile connectivity. So some efforts are being taken. They're yet to be implemented. So we'll see how they work out. Uh, there is often also a demand that there should be more parking near a metro station so that people can drive to a metro station and then take the metro. Um, Experts have always said that that's not a great idea because there's very limited parking that you can provide in any case. Luckily, the Metro MD also understands that that will not really make such a big difference to the metro ridership. It's really these other modes that need to be integrated with the metro system. And that we shouldn't look at buses and metro as being competing with one another, but that they should complement one another. The only big victim of the metro in Pune has been the bus rapid transit system, which has now been ruthlessly been pulled out, ripped out once the metro came into the city, which of course people like us are extremely unhappy about.
Right, sir. So, I think from what you've said so far, also one great thing is the MD of Metro having a realization also about the bus system, because often it happens when you have multiple bodies at the local level, at a city level, looking into different transport, systems. One might favor their own. It is possible. So, but so especially a decision maker needs to be truly informed about the various systems and what is ultimately beneficial for the community. So I think in few other states we've heard otherwise. At least in Pune's case, happy to know that the Metro MD also understands, and I also believe that even PMPML and the authorities understand how Metro can be merged together. So, so I'll come to my very last question. Now, you've talked about Pune scenario and also how it's happening in a couple of other cities, sort of similar in Indian cities. So, what would you say needs to be kept in mind when a metro system needs to be introduced in a city where there's already an existing well-functioning BRT or bus system? How should authorities go by it? What would you say are the indicators to be kept in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can certainly say this. I still think that metro will remain a political project, and therefore it is likely to get approved or likely to be implemented for non-transport related reasons. But I think that in an ideal world, looking at the metro as part of the mobility system, I think metros are being looked at as a construction project. And which is why the issue that you mentioned comes up, is that there's a very silo way of thinking about one's own project without looking at how this integrates with the mobility systems of the city as a whole. I think we have to recognize that metro is an extremely expensive form of transport, and therefore it has to work wherever it is implemented, which means that a large number of people should now start opting for public transport, not necessarily metro, but public transport in general. And the combination of buses, walking, cycling, metro is what should be the first preference of people. And the whole system has to be organized around that, which means that one of the prerequisites for having a metro in any city should ideally be that there should be a good bus system to begin with. Because you can't have a city with just a metro, no bus system, and expect it to work, because the metro will simply not have that kind of connectivity. And this issue of last mile connectivity will come up, which frankly is going to be a very difficult problem to solve, because it's not very easy. Once you have to undertake 2 or 3 transfers, then a lot of people lose interest and they would rather take their own vehicle and make that trip in the first place. So I think it's important to look at the ecosystem of the mobility options in that city. You need to have extremely good walkable cities, because how else are people going to walk those half a kilometer or 1 kilometer, which is necessary once you have a public transport system. You simply cannot have a city which is non-walkable and which would then have a successful public transport system. So having great walkability, having a decent bus system in place, and having a metro only when the ridership really justifies that system is what we need to do. The other thing that they're doing with metro is they're trying to bring about this idea of densification, which will lead to more ridership on the metro. I think that experiment has also not worked very well. Also, we know that Indian cities are already quite dense. In fact, densification is an idea that we borrowed from the West, because often they have a problem of low density. We don't have that problem. So we really should be looking at metro systems that will work under the conditions in which they are. I wish more cities would consider bus rapid transit as a viable alternative. But quite frankly, given the political scene where we are right now, I just don't see that happening. Wherever there is BRT, if it can be revived after the metro has been constructed, even that would be a good idea. But yeah, I think we're going to look the metro story over the next 10 years is going to be a very interesting story. And I think that there are experts like Mr. Ashok Datar from Mumbai, who has been studying this extensively, who says that this is going to be a real financial problem, because we're making all these investments, we're not going to get the returns on these investments, and eventually these things are going to catch up with us. So I think we need to look at it very carefully. But meanwhile, there is absolutely no escaping the fact that we need to build cities where there is cycling, walking, good bus services, and also restrictions on vehicles, which is another thing that is not being talked about. But with the advent of metro, one expects that the city should undertake some strict car and two-wheeler disincentives so that people are encouraged to use these alternative modes.
Thank you so much, sir. From your response, I think it is clear that it is time that we start pushing and nudging people to use more of public transport systems, because ideally the ground line problem that we are trying to solve over here is reduce the number of vehicles on roads, number of cars. Motorization is the problem we are having, or planning which is sort of motor centric is also a problem. So these are the baseline problems which we're trying to sort of eradicate. So like you said, it's about giving proper quality of services, integrating different systems, and like you very well mentioned, just having a system in places like metro is not just it, but also ensuring first and last mile connectivity, proper non-motorized transport policies to bring in cycling and walking infrastructure, and other shared mobility options such as share autos and all of that. I think it's also about bringing all of these into place, and then having a metro system would ensure that people would be more encouraged to use public transport system, and the whole ecosystem also would be sort of attractive for people to use. And with that, we are coming to an end. Thank you so much, Mr. Ranjit, for beautifully sort of painting the picture of how the metro system and the BRTS system is. And we couldn't go in depth into some of the debates, but I'm sure for our listeners, they will get an idea about what are the recent discussions and debates that's happening around. And once again, thank you so much for taking your time and discussing this with us.